Well, good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. It was a bumpy start for President Trump as he plowed through his first 100 days in office, not because of any lack of planning on his part, but because of a large number of liberal local judges who put up every possible roadblock they could to slow the president down. Lacking any good ideas for a better future, the Democrats just resorted to political games. Everyone knew it wouldn't last, but they did manage to slow the president's momentum on some very important issues, including enforcing our immigration laws with 20 million missing people and only 5,000 men and women on the ICE payroll, and the deportation of a big-time human trafficker who also happened to abuse his wife. They said he was a family man who needed protection. I think it was actually the other way around. We needed protection from him. The tariffs were to level out the global economic playing field, but the judges found a way to slow those down. The cuts of waste and fraud and some of the outrageous U.S. aid spending, the taxes we paid being wasted for years. And then there's the dismantling of the Voice of America, which was running an anti-Trump 24/7 channel globally. But the judges' agenda finally hit the wall once the Supreme Court ruled that local judges can rule only within their jurisdiction. No more California judges trying to hold up the agenda of the man who was elected nationally by more than 77 million people. Those days, I pray, are over. The decision came on the birthright citizenship case, and it led to an unprecedented attack within the Supreme Court when conservative Amy Coney Barrett responded to the written opinion of the liberal Ketanji Brown Jackson. Ketanji Jackson had written that quite unlike a rule of king's governing system, it was a clear swipe at the president. In a rule of law regime, nearly every act of government may be challenged by an appeal to law. To which Amy Coney Barrett wrote that Ketanji Jackson's argument was a startling line of attack that is tethered to no doctrine whatsoever. Within the decorum of the Supreme Court, that was a public smackdown. With that, I want to bring the Vice President of the Government Accountability Institute and the host of the Drilldown podcast, Eric Eggers. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Alan, it's always great to be with you and your audience. Good to see you.
Well, it's good to see you. We have seen so many desperate attempts to try to stop President Trump from succeeding. But the issue of the local judges putting out national directives clearly just went too far. The Supreme Court decision was 6-3. It's being called a win, not just for the president, but for the presidency as well. What's your take on all that drama?
Yeah, finally, common sense is restored to the branch of the judiciary. This practice of judge shopping and allowing one lower court judge to essentially dictate and halt federal policy that essentially was the demonstration of the will of the Democratic vote for president back in 2024 with the election of Donald Trump, I think is not what this country was about. And by the way, that's not a controversial stance. That's a stance held by many people, including Judge Elena Kagan, who said previously that this practice of looking, no matter who's out of office, you then go find a sympathetic judge and you use access to the court system to try to stop this from happening. It's not American, it's not okay. And finally, the Supreme Court found the right case to say, we agree, let's put an end to this and let's let President Trump be in charge of federal policy.
It's refreshing to see common sense in the public square again. And another fresh sign of how badly wounded the Democratic Party is, a socialist just won the nomination to represent the Democrats in the race for New York mayor. The previously unknown Zoran Mamdani wants to defund the police, raise taxes, provide free bus rides, and open government grocery stores and more. Listen to how he pitched himself on a network broadcast.
You are a self-described democratic socialist. Do you think that billionaires have a right to exist?
I don't think that we should have billionaires because, frankly, it is so much money in a moment of such inequality. And ultimately, what we need more of is equality across our city and across our state and across our country.
You know, of course, none of that would work, and much of it's outside the bounds of anything the New York City mayor can do by law. But he's got AOC on his side, and the progressives are jumping for joy. Longtime city residents are looking at how to get out, worried that it could become the next San Francisco. What do you see happening in the city?
Yeah, I think that the people should be worried about becoming the next San Francisco. Alan, this story is incredibly fascinating because I think it portends a much larger problem and a debate the Democrats are having internally. Because let's think about what is Mamdani's appeal. His appeal is it's a rejection of the status quo. The status quo in New York, of course, being what happens when you are run by Democrats, as they have been for decades. So it's not like people in New York City love the idea of a socialist. It's that they hate what New York City has become under Democratic rule. Under Democratic rule, New York City has much higher crime than it did pre-pandemic, while the rest of the country's crime trends have gone down. Their economy has gone down, while the rest of the country's economy has gone up post-pandemic. New York City has been left behind. And so it's not that the citizens are choosing to be socialist, they're just trying to reject what it's been. And ironically, in doing so, they may have the sort of unfortunate disadvantage, if you're a Democrat, of pulling the party further to the left when the election results of just last fall show that's not where the country is at all.
Well, former President Biden is starting to peek back out from his Delaware beach house. At the same time, House Republicans have begun investigating who put the ink in the auto signature machine and who else hit the go button when it was being used. I know you've investigated much of what Joe Biden did over the years. So do you have any sense of what Congressman Comer and his colleagues might turn up now?
Well, what I want to know, Alan, is if Joe Biden peeks out and he sees his shadow, does it mean he has to go back home and take a nap for another 4 hours? Like, is it like Groundhog Day that way? I am worried about, what ultimately the House Oversight Committee's investigation under Chairman Comer will yield. I know that I think there's a very good reason why pardons were given to people in Joe Biden's inner circle for essentially the entire duration of his presidency, including up through December. And so I think, a lot of people ask, like, who's been really running the country? And I think the frequency and the people who were in charge of that auto pin will be able to sort of answer that question. We're hearing now from our sources of people who work in the Trump administration in Washington, D.C., whether it's in the Department of Justice or elsewhere in the city, there's still a lot of internal pushback. And I think that the remnants of people who thought they could get away with whatever they wanted to do because you had a very weak and, quite frankly, out-of-touch President Biden, they still think they're running the country. And so luckily you have appointees from President Trump who are trying to wrest back control from the auto pen bureaucracy, if you like. But it's a challenge, and I think it's one that needs to be continuously investigated, as Chairman Comer is attempting to do.
Well, Eric, would you please stay for another segment? I got a few more questions for you.
Anytime, absolutely.
Well, in the meantime, take a moment and dial into ajnow.com. That's our new site where you can write us an email or pull up previous episodes on subjects that you like. I'll be back with more in just a moment. We're back now with the Vice President of the Government Accountability Institute, Eric Eggers. Lacking any new ideas, the Democrats appear to be drifting to whoever gets the most media attention. Chuck Schumer, AOC, Tim Walz, J.B. Pritzker, and of course, Gavin Newsom. I can't remember anything they've said except that they get unusually animated, and what's left of the legacy media just loves following them around for the video clips. Here's an example of the kind of attack Gavin Newsom is putting out, even as President Trump is trying to make California a safer place.
This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation, putting our people, our officers, and even our National Guard at risk. That's when the downward spiral began. That's just weakness masquerading as strength. Donald Trump's government isn't protecting our communities. They're traumatizing our communities.
Eric, Newsom can't run for governor next year because of the term limits in California. So it appears that he's either running for something or running away from his unsuccessful time in office. What do you see?
Well, I think, Alan, even if Gavin Newsom could run for governor, I don't think he would, because the only thing that's inflamed and combustible is actually California, thanks to he and Karen Bass and everyone else's failed leadership in that state. In fact, it was Donald Trump who helped put an end to the wildfire tragedy in that state last year. Now, I will say, I think that, think about what he calls weakness. Let's just unpack the logic of that. Sending in the National Guard, sending in people whose job it is to uphold the law and protect the citizenry, according to Gavin Newsom, is putting that citizenry in danger. That's exactly backward thinking. That's anti-law enforcement dogma that may sound good to Democrats. It may win you bonus points in the Democratic primary, but it will absolutely cost you in any sort of general election. And more importantly, it's just bad for the citizenship of your state and this country. Law enforcement put themselves in harm's way. They went in there regardless of what conditions were happening. They went in there to try to protect the rule of law, and no one provoked a fight on behalf of the National Guard. It was the citizenry who'd been inflamed by the rhetoric of Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass that actually caused the problem. Most Americans know that, and that's why Gavin Newsom's tenure is going to end with a whimper, unfortunately, as governor of California.
With the big, beautiful budget now approved by House and Senate Republicans only, is there any policy you can think of where Democrats have gotten behind President Trump?
No. I think it passed with only Republican support for that reason. I think, unfortunately, Democrats probably were successful behind the scenes in restoring some of the welfare spending on behalf of illegal immigrants. I think it's a little bit weaker in some key areas than I know a lot of Republicans would like. It's not the final version yet. I know people like Ron Johnson from Wisconsin who were very against the bill initially. He voted to support it in the Senate. Chip Roy in Texas was against it initially. They voted to support it in the House. So I think you still have some strong voices that want to get it to be the best, most beautiful version of itself. And we'll see how the process plays out. But if it happened, it has not happened with Democrat support.
Well, I think that fundamental question is important because a lot of these issues are 75, 80% issues. And the Democrats have stayed in the opposition lane against that. Do they really think they're powerful enough to force their will over the majority of the American people?
I think it's just they don't know what to do, right? I mean, if Gavin Newsom, who's literally presiding over a third world state in California, is considered a front runner, they are searching for identity. Even the leadership of the Democratic National Committee is in turmoil right now. You saw them oust David Hogg and another deputy because the brand was considered to be so toxic. Even the head of the teachers' unions has announced that they're stepping down in terms of their affiliation with the head of the Democratic National Committee because they're in such disarray. The Democratic brand is toxic. They don't know what they stand for. So the only thing they can do is stand against what President Trump supports. Fortunately for President Trump, he has the support not of Democrats, but of the American people, and that's why his agendas continue to be successful.
Well, I'd like to end with something that I found truly stood out amid all the political friction. It was written up in the Washington Examiner, a well-documented report on how there are signs that there's an active movement to teach America's founding principles and our true history, all through thoughtful and engaged citizenship. It started with a nonprofit group that has already reached 1,300 university professors and 2,800 K through 12th grade teachers. It's quite the opposite of what we're learning about what students are taught at Harvard and Columbia. Do you think there's a segment of young people who are tired of being brainwashed by radicals and are now ready for some common sense? True stories about what made our country as strong as it is? It's really hopeful, it seems.
Alan, it's such a great point, and I'm so glad you brought it up because you're absolutely correct. I think if there's one lesson to take away from the support that Donald Trump got from young people and young men specifically last fall, it's that people are hungry for the truth. They were lied to by the mainstream media and a lot of progressive forces, including in schools and higher education institutions for years. And so people hear something else and it's refreshing because it's true and it's different than the lies that have been force-fed. So I do think there's absolutely an appetite to it. You know, I live in Florida, and Florida's introduced civics education a few years ago under the leadership of Governor DeSantis, and it's been incredibly successful. And if you think about it, civics education by definition should be a unifying concept. Because it's not left or right, it's just true. It's like, here's what these group of people who were avoiding true persecution and true tyranny, they came to this country with a better vision for what their future could be, and they were brave enough to act on that vision, and we are all now the beneficiaries of it. So I absolutely think it should be unifying, it should be aspirational. You know, that movie Superman is coming out in a couple weeks, and I've seen the previews for it, and I find that it touches on the true themes of what this country is about. The tagline is look up, and I think that's what ultimately Americans want to do. They want to look up towards a brighter and better future. The Trump administration, I think, is trying to provide that. Democrats are not. It's why they're being successful. I think civics education is a great step towards looking up as a country for what we can continue to be.
Well, Eric, thank you for joining us again today. It's always a treat to have you on. We'll have you back real soon.